social psychologist that's kind of all over the news right now because he came out with this book, The Anxious Generation.
Oh, right. Jonathan Haidt.
Haidt. And what I love though about his perspective is he talks about this, and he talks about how, we over control in our houses too, right? So kids can't make mistakes in their social life, and we don't let them make mistakes in their personal life because we do this grass cutting parent.
Right.
So
what does that mean?
So grass cutting parent is like move over helicopter parent. Grass cutter parent is like
the new thing.
She's such a badass and not the right way, right? So what this grass cutter parent does is we're gonna take away any element of harm. We're gonna make sure our children don't, a child's picking on you. We're gonna go talk to that parent immediately. We're gonna, we're not gonna let our kids go ride their bikes out in the streets, be home by the street lights on. We take away all elements of risk so that our children don't have to experience
any discomfort. Welcome to Anchored Minds, the podcast where we explore the intersections of mental health, neuroscience, and the human experience. I'm your host, Lana Doan, and today we're diving into a critical and timely conversation, the surge of child and youth mental health. Joining me today is my friend, Laurel Brannigan, a registered social worker with over 2 decades of experience working on the front lines of the social service sector. Throughout her career, she's supported adolescents navigating substance misuse, trauma, and crisis situations. She also has a private practice. Laurel works with children, adults, and couples, often using play therapy with kids and a trauma-informed approach that helps clients connect the dots between their past experiences and current behaviors. She's also a mom and brings a grounded, compassionate lens to the complex realities of parenting, healing, and the human connection. Today, we're unpacking what's fueling the rise in youth mental health, how our systems are responding or failing to, and what we can do to support the next generation more effectively. Let's get into it. Welcome, Laurel.
Hi.
Thank you
Thanks for having me.
So one thing about Laurel and I that you may not know is that we did school together.
We did.
We went to grad school in 2012, and then we became parents right around the same time. And so it's been amazing watching Laurel grow in her journey as a professional. And really, I have mad respect for her because when she gave birth the first time, we were in school and she really only missed 1 class.
Yeah.
And so right at that moment, I knew her work ethic was strong. And so it really resonates with me in the fact that she is our first guest today on Anchored Minds. So welcome, Laurel. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You want to get right into it? Let's start with your first question. Okay. So what changes have you seen in the mental health of children and teens over the past few years?
This is something that I get asked a lot in the sense, like we acted like none of this existed, years ago. I will say that I do get a lot more referrals based on youth struggling with anxiety and depression. But what I try to tell people is, I'll have parents say to me, this just never existed before. And like it did. We just didn't really notice what it was. Obviously, the pandemic, we're really only 5 years out from the beginning of the pandemic. And that did, initiate a lot more feelings, a lot more anxiety, a lot more signs we were seeing in kids. But I really do think the difference is we were really focusing on the behavior outcome now of anxiety and depression. Right. So I am seeing it more. I mean, we're seeing the pressures of youth a lot more. When I work with kids and, tell me about your life. And it's like, well, they're stressed about school. They're stressed about sports. They're stressed about relationships, social environment. I have kids as young as 9 that are super stressed about their social groups. Like, how many friends do I have? Or I'm not getting invited to this sleepover. And so when we say that it didn't really exist before, it did. I think as adults, we did a lot of minimizing those feelings. You're fine. You'll get invited to the next one. Don't worry so much about it.
Do you think it's because we didn't know as much as we know now?
Oh, absolutely. Right. Like, we learn a lot. I read something recently where it talked about like every generation going back hundreds and hundreds of years had a lot of similar baseline stressors that we have now. Because when you think of it, every decade, every generation, we get more technology, we get more innovations. And so we learn more, right? So yeah. Our parents' generation was very much that, even a little bit maybe when we were little was that seen, not heard. mentality when it came to kids.
Right. And they didn't have the exposure to the research we have now.
No, right. And there was no research. We weren't doing it, right? We didn't know. I mean, we could talk for hours about this, but even the way we deal with trauma now compared to we dealt with like, in the 70s is completely night and day.
What do you mean how we deal with it?
So the way we view when you had someone that went to war in Vietnam, right? When they came back and we were dealing with significant PTSD. At the time, psychiatrists really felt that we were going to re-talk about that trauma over and over and over again until it becomes comfortable. We know now that that is not something helpful and beneficial.
You don't have to completely unpack it.
PTSD. Yeah. Right. It's more, how to help them unpack it in other ways. And there's a lot of research in different modalities that help with that. You're not going to have a sexual abuse survivor really recant that entire traumatic experience. And they did that decades and decades ago, right? What did we learn through research? How to handle it differently. And it's the same with youth. So with youth that are really struggling with mental health, there was a lot that was, I remember 20 years ago working in different agencies where kids that were cutting, and we would say, oh, it's not, I don't want to say we would say, but there was a lot of that mentality of, oh, it's attention seeking, and there was a podcast I listened to where a psychiatrist is talking about an individual he works with, a youth, and how long has he been cutting for? And the parents say he's been cutting for 2 years, but they just found out recently. And the comment the parents say is, but we think it's attention seeking. And the psychiatrist, his response was, well, wow, he did a really horrible job at getting your attention, right? But again, we've learned it's not that. So
what do you think that is? Like I'm hearing the connection seeking versus attention seeking. And is that truly what it is? Or is it really a deep mental health underlying issue below it where we need to figure out what that is at the same time as we're connecting?
Absolutely. And the other thing where I love that we are talking more about anxiety, depression, because again, it was always there. Kids have more verbiage now to talk about it, right? So hopefully they have a parent or an adult in their life that openly talks about their mental health journey or their struggles. I know in my kids' school, I don't know at what age it started, but I definitely know in health class, they are starting to talk about mental health a little bit. I can, there's several different school boards here. Obviously, I can speak for my board. Does it go deep enough? No, but I do think it's kind of bringing some things to the forefront for kids for sure.
Absolutely. So one big factor that I'm really seeing today is that social media is, it's creating this huge anxiety and depression surge as well. Do you think that plays a role? And if it does play a role, what do you think are more like the chemical and neuroscience behind that?
I could speak for hours about this.
Yeah.
It's definitely something that I'm very interested in. So one of the first things I do in my practice is when I have a parent that wants their child to start seeking services, I need to get a little bit of history. I need to understand a bit, what does your routine look like at home? What are the expectations? How often is your child using technology? And it gives me an idea of really what's going on. Because a lot of times why parents are seeking out counseling services for even their little kids. Again, things exhibit in behaviors, right? So he's hitting, he's not listening, things like that. But what is the underlying mental health emotion or emotions
and what message,
there?
And what I'm hearing through social media is that every behavior has a message. So what message are kids trying to give you with those behaviors? Or is that is that our job to figure that out?
It is, right? And that's a really great point, because it is our job to figure that out instead of masking it, right? So, I'm not going to fix the behavior. What my role is going to be is help trying to underline what's really going on there. And with kids, and especially when I do play therapy, a lot of it is really helping kids attach the feeling and emotion with using words. And they don't have that word. So the kid that's, really angry, getting off the tablet, it's okay to, you're really frustrated right now. You're really having a hard time with that. But where the social media really comes in is we're kind of in an unprecedented era right now, right? Like you and I growing up.
A whole new generation.
Right? My first phone, I was 21. It was a flip phone. There were no apps. I remember when texting was why text? You could call someone.
I know, because you had to do AB, 1, 2, 3.
Right? Our games were Snake on the phone. Or we didn't have this stuff. Yeah. Right. And so where I really come at with this as families is I'm not looking to eliminate technology. Yeah. Social media itself, and all what we're doing today, it has great platforms, right? Obviously, but there's a time and a place and there's an age for it. What we know with social media is kids are going on younger and younger, and it's really shaping who they feel they are. They're forming opinions of themselves through the lens of other people versus exploring that at their own pace.
What about the rewiring of the brain piece? Like what's that doing to the actual brain? And like, because it's such a big source of dopamine. So dopamine would be something that you get from rewards. So like sugar gives you dopamine, heroin gives you dopamine. So like, this is bad, right? Like, like Laura,
so what it does, and it's funny you said that, because there is some science behind this. And this is, again, one of the things I really try to do to educate when I have, whether I have little kids in my office or I have teenagers or I have adults, is really explain the brain. So we do so much work with people to understand the outside of your body, right? So, you go to the gym, you work out, you eat healthy, so you can get this like external physical view of yourself or when other people look. We don't see the brain. But what I really try to teach kids is the brain is a muscle, and the brain is a part of your body that you have to nourish, and you have to, formulate like different ideas and really like how to, what's the word I'm thinking of? How to develop it, right? So when you're young, like our prefrontal cortex does not fully develop until, science keeps changing, but right now they're saying around 25.
Yes.
There's some research
so
that
the
says even
prefrontal
later.
cortex is like that part in the front of your brain that is your working memory and your executive functioning. So that's how you order your life. That's how you relate to other people. And that's like your short-term memory. And that's why it's so important to, when children their brains are still growing and we're giving them all this information so fast.
Right.
What's that doing for their development?
We get frustrated when we ask your child to put their shoes on 3 times. They don't do it, right? But at the same time, they're still developing their brain.
Right.
But then we give them these devices where they scroll, they get these. So the example I like to give to families is, when you scroll and you're getting, like you talked about, those quick dopamine. Right. We do it as adults. I get it. Why else do I have Instagram? I'm on it and we get it as well. The goal for kids though, especially kids, and I say kids because we really have to start these like preventative measures young, right? Is think of an IV drip, and you get that drip slowly, that slow dopamine drip. So whether that be you have your kids go outside, there's a group of kids in the neighborhood. In our generation, we grew up playing hide and go seek in the neighborhood till the light, till it was dark outside. But you're slowly getting that dopamine drip. You're still getting the excitement. You're still getting the thrill, the satisfaction, but it's happening slowly.
But your brain has the time to gather the information, to process the information, and to grow at the pace it's supposed to. And right now it's just too fast. And then you're like you were talking about, it's coming out in behaviors. And then parents are coming to you and saying, I have these behaviors, but what are the cause of those behaviors? And maybe part of it is the parent's reaction to it. And then the other piece is what they're exposed to. So we do have some sort of accountability for how we behave. So do you think that the parents' parenting style, there's so many, and throughout history, there's been, various kinds of authoritarian, gentle parenting. And how do we know what's right? And what is the thing that we should be doing now?
This is a hard one in this generation. This is one of the first generations where, we're really seeing, my mom worked part-time for many years until she had to go back and work full-time. But, we're seeing this generation, most homes have 2 working parents, or if you are a single parent in this economy, how hard is that? So we do use technology with our kids a lot as a babysitting device. And I don't mean, I know the information. I still use it when I need to at times, right? And so it's not to knock parenting and what you do in those situations, but it is, like you said, being more aware. So being more aware. So I'll give you an example. Your kid gets home from school. You've worked full time all day. Maybe you're a single parent, or your partner's also worked full time. You get home and we get in the rush of life. Empty backpacks. I'm going to cook, make dinner. Maybe you got to get to a sporting event or a piano recital. And so it's rush, right? Our lives today are so fast paced. So what is the easiest thing to do so that you don't have to engage your child after school? You're surviving. And so you're throwing them on the tablet, you're throwing them on a device. And what happens? Time goes by. Instead of the 10 minutes you think it's going to be, an hour's gone by. Now you're asking your child to get off that device. Well, they're so stimulated, right, at this point. And now the behavior show. My son or my daughter was kicking and screaming and hitting me and spitting on me. Like, I've seen it all. And we don't, we think that there's something wrong with that child instead of really understanding the science and the brain chemistry behind it, that you just, if you were an adult, and the example would be if you were in the middle of doing something on your phone and someone just took your phone away and you were like, you're done right now. We would feel Like,
yeah,
we
I'd be
weren't,
annoyed. Yeah.
right? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But we put this expectation on kids. When we go back to the pandemic, we got so comfortable in this generation with it, because I remember sitting at
Yeah.
home. My husband was lucky enough that he got to leave home every day to go do his job and worked from home, homeschooled, did all the stuff. I don't remember who it was, but I remember having the TV on one day, and it was some type of medical professional saying, don't worry, this is a moment in time. They're not going to be on devices forever. And like, little did we know, weeks turned into months, months turned into years, and our kids were on it nonstop.
Yeah. Well, they were online school.
Yeah.
And then you had to also be on your computer at the same time as they were on the computer.
Yeah.
And then how?
Society normalized it. Education normalized it. Government normalized it.
They do. And then part of my kid's IEP is that she gets to have her own Chromebook, so she doesn't have to share.
Right.
Like, what? All day long on the Chromebook?
Yeah.
How is that even good? Right. So what's happening here? And so I think what really we need to talk about is how much time is healthy, and what would you recommend that parents say, or what is the recommendation out there right now with the psychologists?
That really does vary. Like, you're going to have some, especially social psychologists, that will say like absolutely none. And I don't necessarily think research will say that's better for you. Absolutely. But we have to also think what's realistic and attainable, right? So, and it's going to vary child to child. Like, we can't parent each child the same, because it's different. I have kids that I will really recommend on a school day, no tablet technology. They can watch TV. And even that, when I say TV, it's not YouTube on the TV. Like, YouTube, I think, is something that we could talk for hours about as well, because it's very detrimental.
I think there's a list. I just saw a list the other day, 10 programs you shouldn't watch on YouTube for kids.
Well, because we have all the streaming stuff now. And so, I really do, that is something, a core belief of mine, that I think when kids are young, no technology during the week. I had to do that in my household, and let me tell you, there was tears and kicking and screaming. But I have a son that really has a hard time regulating, and it's my job as his mom to teach him how to regulate. And technology really makes him dysregulated. And what does that mean when you say dysregulated? So they don't have the skill set yet to really be able to calm themselves down, to really, as an adult, again, adults, we focus so much on kids. Adults have a hard time with this. If I'm really frustrated and I'm really overwhelmed, I now know some skill sets, right? I know to close my eyes, take a deep breath, take several breaths, and I can sort of like work at regulating myself. Right. This is something I've seen some schools will teach this with older kids as well. Kids don't know this, right? And to recognize it, I'm heightened right now. I'm heightened, yeah. And so for little kids especially, like, that's where play therapy comes really in hand, and I try to really educate parents on how to do it at home, is teaching them how to identify their emotions. We can't self-regulate until we identify what emotions and feelings we're trying to. So if it is anger, if it is sadness, we need to put those words into place, like, what's play therapy, Laura? So play therapy is, I get a lot of pushback about this at times. Play therapy. So I'm not a registered play therapist, but I utilize a lot of play therapy techniques, absolutely. Right, from training. Yeah. What play therapy is pretty magical in that you use toys, art, and you use that's a child's first language. So a child's first language is play. We're not going to get mad at a child when they haven't spoken by the age of 1 yet, right? But they know how to do other things. They know how to kind of, play peekaboo and do different things. So what a child does in play, when they don't have the verbiage to explain, like, I'm sad, I'm angry, I'm frustrated, you see it in play. An activity I often do is I bring out like dinosaurs and animals. And, when kids are trying to exhibit, let's say, even a social circle. So like sharing, that T-Rex took my toy and now they knock him over. It's really frustrating when friends take, when dinosaurs take our toys, and how does that make you feel? And we talk about it. So we put words with the emotion. Do you help them with dialogue as well? Just to do a little bit of role playing in that? So we do a lot of role playing, and we do a lot of like when helping them with the words because a kid will say like, I'm angry, and they won't say they're angry, but you'll see them clench their fists or they'll stomp their feet, and the body language. And that's what's really helping with putting words into play for that, is to help them understand that. So once they understand what they're feeling, then you can talk about coping strategies. Then you can talk about breathing techniques, or you can talk about, taking some time away, going to your room and having a quiet corner. And there's a lot of different things you can do there, but that's not something that really comes firsthand for kids. And as parents, that's a lot what I teach parents how to work on that at home. Take those opportunities and in a lot of it is modeling. So if I'm at home and I'm cooking and something knocks over and breaks and I'm frustrated, I will now mirror that. So we want, we talk about rewiring, that's how modeling is helping rewire your child's brain. And it's saying, I'm really frustrated that broke, or I'm angry that broke, but I'm going to clean it up. And we model how we feel, right? So we validate their feelings and emotions by how we handle it at home.
What if a parent has a hard time regulating themselves? Do you think that what are some of the things that a parent could do to help regulate themselves? Do they need to do some of their own work? Do they have unprocessed trauma? How do you think that translates into their caregiving style?
I mean, a lot of that translates from our past and our childhood, right?
Yeah.
One of the first things that I really advocate for when parents are sending their kids to counseling is what are they doing for themselves and their own mental health journey? My kids are very much aware that I'm in my own therapy, right? And it's not because a good therapist will have a therapist.
Absolutely.
But also I have 40 odd years of, my own life experience and things that I'm trying to unpack and process. And I definitely notice myself be a more, I align with more the type of parent I want to be when I work on myself. And I'll give you an example. If you are a parent that grew up in a really high stress home, maybe a very abusive home, and you say, let's say a physically abusive home, I'm as a parent, I'm not going to hit my kid. And so check one, you have kids and you're not now, you don't use those techniques. You're not a physically abusive parent, but maybe you're a really verbally abusive parent because you're screaming a lot, you're yelling a lot. Our expectations for our kids are just, way out of reach. There's not really healthy boundaries in place. So it comes out in other areas, right? Like if you're trying to, suck it all in and it's going to seep out in other areas of your life if you don't process and work on that. A really great example that I learned from a trauma psychologist was, you picture you have a beach ball and you're in the water and you're pushing this beach ball underwater and you're putting all your might and force on it. And it's so hard and this is your trauma. Trauma is a beach ball.
You're trying to squish it down.
Yeah. And I mean, the amount of people, especially men that I have in my practice, and they say, oh, it's okay. I've pushed that down. I don't need to deal with it. Right?
I put it in a box.
And it's gone away. Yeah. But I want to talk about this other issue. And then, you start working with them and you're like the connection and whatnot. And they realize we have to work in the trauma. But with the beach ball, eventually when you keep pushing it down, what happens is it just explodes to the water. It makes a massive splash. And that's parenting, right? That might be the day you scream at your child or you get really triggered by things. Like let's say your child's crying. Why are you so triggered by your child crying? And then you realize maybe that was something you were really shamed for growing up, right? You couldn't, especially with boys, you couldn't cry, you couldn't show emotion, you couldn't do this. So opposed to, okay, we have the beach ball, here's my trauma. And it is pushed underwater, but I'm slowly letting it get to the surface. And this is part of what therapy is really important. You're working on this in therapy and you're slowly working on the trauma and slowly the beach ball is coming to the surface. And instead of that massive splash, maybe it's just little splash, as soon as it gets above the surface. And what I love, for me, I'm a visual person.
That's really visual for me. I like that.
What I love about that, when I learned that, when I did some trauma training, was it's always going to come out. You can never push anything down. You can't push your feet. Everyone pushes feelings. You think you can push feelings down. It comes out in other ways. The unfortunate part about why it's so important for parents is it comes out on our kids a lot, right? We take a lot out of them. We had a really hard day at work. We're frustrated. And then we're angry that our child left a homework assignment to the end of the night and we lose it. And is it about the homework assignment or are we frustrated? Is it something else, right? So the more I think that we can do the work on ourselves.
Yeah, recognizing your own triggers.
Yeah. And one of these days, I know I always say I'm going to find a better example, but it really is putting the mask on yourself before you put it on your child on an airplane. And that is because they need us. We are their caretakers. We are who they look for.
And to be present for them and to model what that calmness and let them steal our calm or share our calmness. And so that we can be that sturdy parent for them.
Right. And you and I've talked about this before, but really it's connection before correction, right?
Yes.
And it's really, connecting with your child to say like, I'm a work in progress. I am not perfect and I don't expect.
And getting really good at repair.
Oh my gosh.
Right. So clearly we're obviously nobody's going to be perfect, but really, I think what it really, for me, the message that I want you to hear is that get good at repair.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm starting to see that in my kid because she's also getting good at repair.
Yeah.
So if we're both getting,
right?
We're both getting good at repair.
Yeah.
And so we don't stay in that crisis for long. And
when I do this with my kids, but something I do, especially when I'm doing play therapy too, is when I'm watching a kid explain a situation, and let's say doing play, dinosaurs, whatever it is they're doing in that moment, and they're really getting worked up, I'll kind of model without using words as to what was helpful.
Yes.
So if it's putting your hand on your chest and taking deep breaths and doing that, and they kind of look at you like, what the heck is Laurel doing? And you'll see them eventually over a session start to, again, model that. So the more you do it, the more you're modeling that. And it's just like, repair as well, right? The more your child hears you, I'm so sorry that mommy overreacted because that happened. It's something I'm working on. This is how I'm working on it.
Adults make mistakes too.
Adults make mistakes. Yeah. I really think it's healthy for kids to see parents argue and have a healthy argument and how you repair that argument after.
Yes. Sometimes they don't see the other end of it. Like I might catch myself in an argument and then later my husband and I repair, but we don't do it in front of her.
Right.
And so then she doesn't see the ending to our argument and thinks that we're still mad at each other. And she has said to me, Mom and Dad, I need you to make up. And when we've already made up.
Yeah, I know.
So I think that it's important for them to see it from beginning to end.
Right.
I'm not talking like the bad kind of arguing where it creates that anxiety, that fight or flight in your kid, but demonstrating how you can have a healthy argument because that's going to happen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And even like, circling back to social media, talking about some of the things we're talking about, if you don't work on that and that connection with your kids, they seek it out in other places, right?
Yes.
And so we have all these really like isolated individuals. So some of the signs, my child's in the room all the time, like the door's always shut.
Yes.
They're, I'm not monitoring their phone or their technology. So I see that, you're not seeing that they're on at all hours of night. I take my son has a phone, no phone number or anything, but he has his kid's messenger on it. And I'll notice in the summer, more in the summer, because I think some parents do have better boundaries during the school year, but he hands it in at night. And so I would look through it and I would see friends who are messaging him at 2, 3, 4 in the morning.
Yikes.
And what that does to like, they're going back to brain development, like they're not sleeping regular and it's really
blue
like,
light.
oh, it's horrible. Right. And so that alone creates a different behavior. Why is my son or daughter so moody? Why are they acting this way? And it goes back to regulating and monitoring how much time they're on something, because I notice that if I'm on my phone too much, if it's a case note day and I'm on my computer way too much, I feel horrible. Like I don't feel great. And so
a little bit like wired, like it's kind of like, I can
Yeah.
feel it in my jaw, like that
feel
clenching.
moody. Like I
Yeah.
just feel, and that's when, and then I go outside, I go for a walk, I do something and I instantly feel so much better. And that goes back to play again. We don't encourage that enough with kids to get outside and to be kids and to do that. So I think one of the takeaways I definitely, when I'm talking about this, is I'm not anti-technology. I'm not anti, we need to take it all away. Like the reality is we live in this world.
Right.
But the reality also is it's sort of like you have a weapon. If you become a police officer and you get a gun, there's so much training that goes into how to use that gun, right? You don't just get out on your first day and go shoot. If you get your driver's license, you don't just one day go get your driver's license. There's driver's ed. There's a lot of practice. Like there's a lot of
to safely do it. Yeah.
So my mentality when it comes to, and so social media is not allowed in my house right now, but the day will come in the next few years where I know my son's a teenager that I'll have to do that. We're educating it. I want I want him to learn the safety behind it.
Yeah.
So we've watched documentaries. Something we did recently was we watched The Social Dilemma. And it was interesting because that came out during COVID, when I obviously don't think they had the intent, because it was very early on in COVID that Social Dilemma came out. And what I like about my biggest takeaway from that documentary, obviously it's a very one-sided perspective, and take documentaries with a grain of salt, because it's someone with a view that's putting that out there. But the one thing I love that I really tried to, ingrain in my son is the algorithms and how smart they are, and how smart that they know what to kind of push out to you, and they understand the dopamine. They have like scientists and they have social psychologists that work for those massive Meta and Instagram and Snapchat.
Yeah, and doing the analysis.
Yeah,
just with every touch of that
so
screen.
There's so much like you're not smarter than Facebook. You're not smarter than Instagram, right? You're 13, 14, 15-year-old. So there's so much. So really, before we give our kids all this access to these things, there needs to be a lot of, as parents, educating behind it, the risks. One of the things I see a lot in my practice when it comes to social media, the bullying it scares me.
Yeah.
We thought bullying was bad when we were kids on the playground. Like, it's off the playgrounds. Yeah. It's on TikTok. It's on Instagram, on Snapchat. Kids are making videos of, taking secret videos because phones are in school, as much as they say they're not, they are. And then it's out there for everyone to see. And so the impact
they don't get to make mistakes without it being recorded.
You don't. And it's funny you said that, because the flip of that is, as parents, we don't let kids to make mistakes. So you grew up in this sheltered world where like you can't make mistakes in your social circle, because if someone records it, if someone posts it, it's out there for everyone to see, for the world, right? As parents, there's he's kind of it's a social psychologist that's kind of all over the news right now, because he came out with this book, The Anxious Generation.
Oh, right. Jonathan Haidt.
And what I love though about his perspective is he talks about this, and he talks about how, we over control in our houses too, right? So kids can't make mistakes in their social life, and we don't let them make mistakes in their personal life, because we do this grass cutting parent.
Right.
So we completely, what does that mean? So grass cutting parent is like move over helicopter parent. Grass cutter parent is like
the new thing.
She's such a badass, and not in the right way, right? So what this grass cutter parent does is we're gonna take away any element of harm. We're gonna make sure our children don't, a child's picking on you, we're gonna go talk to that parent immediately. We're gonna, we're not gonna let our kids go ride their bikes out in the streets, be home by the street lights on. We take away all elements of risk so that our children don't have to experience any pain,
any discomfort.
Any discomfort.
But you know what? That creates soft children. Yeah.
Oh, I mean,
maybe.
You know what it does? It creates anxious children.
Yeah.
Like
there you go.
And there's something where, and I laugh when people say like, well, I'm doing this to work on, build their self-esteem. We don't build our children's self-esteem. We give them the tools and the situation so they can like grow their own self-esteem. So how you grow, parents ask me that all the time, like, how do I work on their self-esteem?
Yeah.
Well, what does their home life look like? What are their chores they have to do? Well, they don't do anything. They don't do chores.
How do they feel successful if they're not being led to do stuff?
Right. Yeah. You have to learn to climb the tree, to fall and scrape your knee. Maybe you fracture it. Maybe you got to go to the bone clinic. And yes, that's scary as a parent, but you know what you let your kid do? You let your kid overcome a fear, and work to slowly build that confidence.
And pick themselves back up. And get going again.
Yeah, and that's a big Jonathan Haidt. He himself didn't develop this. Another psychologist did. Where they talk about free range parenting.
Yeah,
and the idea of free range parenting, which very much we grew up in the 80s and the 70s. Free range parenting, where you went on your bike Saturday morning, you got on your bike, and maybe you came home by dinner time. There were no phones to connect with you. If I need to know what time it was, I asked a stranger down the street. If I fell off my bike and needed help, I asked the person walking past me, like if they had a Band-Aid, and then created this, whole fear over decades of the man in the white van. This is the example. Okay, so the man in the white van, we all grew up in the 80s and 90s.
Scary man in the white van.
The scary man in the white van.
Yeah.
And so this fear base. So what parents did was we hyper parented and fixated on the external world, and we created all these boundaries and this structure where, nope, the outside world is scary. So so now they're in the house all the time. What did we do though? We brought the scary world inside the house. So Jonathan Haidt talks about we over supervise outside and we under supervise inside.
Yeah.
So the man in the white van is now
you get this
in
free
your
for
child's
all.
well in your child's room on Snapchat.
Yeah.
And we've allowed this into the home that we don't supervise that. And I mean, for years I worked with police doing investigations on sexual abuse, and really learned a lot about how accessible our kids become through social media. And one of the things that I often think about is, why don't more people know this? I think when it's become it's so prominent now, like access to social media. You know, your daughter thinks that she just added some boy from another school on Snapchat, and it turns out it's some 45-year-old man.
Right. And there's the technology that can make these, even if you can video chat with somebody, there's technology that can make them look younger.
Oh yeah, it's so scary. And that was a big thing I learned from police, is like so many of these cases and so many of these instances of abuse are happening because of these platforms, and it's happening frequently. But why don't we know about it? And I think part of it is it's happening so frequent, the news doesn't even broadcast it anymore, because it's such a,
we're getting desensitized.
We're so desensitized by it. And so I often, when, in my practice, when I talk to parents, I give some of these examples, and not to scare people, but to educate them that, you're not reading about this in the news because the Windsor Star doesn't even care about this anymore, because there's bigger things happening. Right. And so no, it's important to really educate and talk about with our kids and the dangers about that. So part of it is not allowing it. I really, really struggle with certain platforms when kids are young. So why is it okay for our child to have that platform at 9 or 10, but you have to be 16 to get a driver's license and drive a car, or 19 to drink alcohol?
So that makes me think of the next question I have for you is, what should parents be talking to kids about? What do you wish parents should talk to their kids about? What would that be?
I mean, I'm an open book. Like, I just think you talk about everything. One thing I learned from working with, 20 years ago, when I worked in various group homes and with youth, and I was always surprised they would come in. I mean, we would have girls come in and they didn't know about their cycles, or they didn't know about, they didn't know about sex. They
Better to hear from you than from whatever information is on the internet.
Absolutely. And so I really push parents to and educate them on, your kids have everything access at their fingertips. So do you want them to learn from a stranger online and learn wrong stuff? Or do you want them to learn from you? And what that does too is not even just learn from you. What you do is you make uncomfortable conversations comfortable. And so, if your daughter, for example, one day has questions about let's say pornography, do you want her looking it up on YouTube, or do you want her coming to you and you can be like, wow, thanks for asking me, you know what? Yeah, porn. And you go into it, whatever you want to explain about it, but you want them to learn that they can come to you and they can ask you. And what I always try to teach kids and teach my own kids is, there's nothing uncomfortable that we can talk about. Like, if you're thinking about it, it's on your mind and it's not going to go away. So let's explore that together. And then, yes, they're going to seek it out and they're going to learn it. But I want them to learn that what they're seeing might be not correct. So an example I'll give is when I did an internship years ago, working with children of sexual abuse. And something that I found really fascinating was some of these kids were never actually physically touched, but what they were exposed to through YouTube was more harming. I don't want to say more harming, because all kids have different resiliency, but it was very harming to them.
Yes, their experience.
What they experience. So a child that's curious about sex and they start looking it up and Googling it on YouTube. And for this individual, what she witnessed was, S&M, bondage, something that now her first visions and first impression of what sex is very not what I would say. It's normal for some people, and I'm not shaming that, but it's not what we would consider a normal, healthy sexual relationship. And so if my child is going to go out there at some point and explore on the internet what's out there, because I mean, at some point we can't stop everything.
Right. Yes.
What I want parents to know is your child's going to seek out that information and they're going to see that, but they're going to know that that's not a right representation of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And so I think the more you can talk to your kids They're going to see it. Kids at school are going to show them things. I mean, my kids come home from school and they're talking about Donald Trump, or they're talking about politics. And I'm like, what is happening?
Yeah.
But it's a good reminder for me that you can only control so much. So let them learn these things and come home and talk about it.
And they're probably going to talk to you more about it if you created that connection.
Absolutely.
And you've shown throughout the years that you've had this trusting relationship. And so that they're not going to be punished for asking you about those kinds of
Absolutely.
things.
And I think as parents, we put too much pressure on external systems. Like, well, they'll talk to their therapist, they'll talk to their teacher. It's school's job to educate. I mean, there's so much debate about what you should or should not educate in schools, right? About mental health, about sexuality, about all of that. So we can't put the onus on other people. We have to take that on ourselves.
Right.
I think it's really important for, I teach my sons about female reproductive. We talk about, girl cycles, because one day they're going to have a partner or a friend who's going to go through something. And that's not a situation I want them to mock or make fun of. I want them to be a support. Right. And they should understand all this. As soon as you reduce the stigma and you take away that, our kids are like, oh, it's not such a big deal. And they'll blow your mind about their responses sometimes. Oh my God, you're so gross, Mom. Can't believe you said that. And then like a day goes by and they're like, so remember when we were talking about that? So don't kind of, I guess, lose your momentum if you don't get the response you want. Right. You've planted that seed, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
This has been really good. I love talking to people that are smart. So that's kind of nice. So we have 3 takeaways from today. The first one is connection over correction. So you're going to build trust first. So when adults are present and empathic, kids are more likely to feel safe, open up, and grow from that. The other one, number 2, balance over burnout. So excessive screen time and social media can really drain your mental health. Right. So it's rewiring our kids' brains to they're not functioning at their optimum. Right. They've got all this stimulus. So that's the second takeaway. And the third takeaway would be model over message. So you are your parents. We are our parents. Yes, we are our parents. So you are the role model for your kids. And just remember that modeling is really impactful for them. So staying calm, responsive, and consistent teaches them how to handle the tough emotions. Thank you for joining us for this powerful conversation in the surge in child and youth mental health. A big thank you to Laurel Brannigan for bringing her experience, compassion, and clarity to this topic. These are the conversations that move us forward, because real change starts with awareness, connection, and intention. If this episode resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe, follow, and share it with someone who wants to hear it or needs to hear it. We want to hear from you. Drop your questions or thoughts in the comments. We'll be diving deeper in our next post called Unpack This, where we explore questions and unpack the layers. This is Anchored Minds, where change happens with intention. Thank you.